Welcome to Hard Talk. Zalmay Khalilzad, the US envoy who's been in Kabul in the last few days, has delivered the news that after 17 years of fighting, peace with the Taliban could be in sight. You must be delighted.
Well, you are right. The demand for peace is in the veins of every Afghan, but it is the modality of how we negotiate and also what type of peace we achieve is controversial.
Do you agree with President Ashraf Ghani that the Taliban could enter mainstream politics?
Absolutely. We have never opposed any group to become mainstream politics, regardless of what type of politics they pursue, as long as they don't resort to violence and intimidation. Of course, they are most welcome to become a mainstream political entity.
It must be frustrating, though, for you as a former directorate of the security agency, former Director General of the National Directorate of Security. You were there for 6 years, I think, to know that last week, just hours before its leading members sat down for another day of talks with the US envoy, the Taliban attacked one of the NDS bases, killing at least 43 people and injuring many more. They're just the latest in, what, 45,000 serving Afghans who've died in the last 5 years, according to President Ghani. All of them volunteers, certainly the army ones, none of them compelled to serve. But obviously not even enough of those, because some of your former agents have found themselves serving on the front line. It raises the question of how long Afghanistan can carry on without peace.
Well, first of all, it doesn't add to our frustration, it adds to our anger. It adds to our determination, and it adds to our resolve to defend the dignity of our country. How long should it continue? It should not continue for a second. The peace must come today and this moment, but it's not in our hands. We have not launched this war. We have not initiated this. We are victims, and we are on the receiving end of it.
The terrible problem for Afghanistan, though, is given the numbers I've just quoted to you, the reality is that if the Allies and the United States were to pull out, you'd have to sue for peace to the Taliban, possibly on their terms, because you don't have the capacity to keep the fight up.
Well, I mean, let's put this straight. We are not a country that have been invented by the West. We were not born on September 12, 2001. We are a very old country, a very old nation. We have fiercely fought for our dignity and honor and independence. So we will continue to exist post-Western withdrawal if that happens anytime soon, which I am not sure. So this is a psychological offensive on Afghans, that you are so dependent that if there is no West, you cease to exist as a state, or you cease to exist as an entity. I completely disagree with that. We will be able to fight for our people, for our country.
Well,
and of course, with the West, it will be an added value.
Let me put to you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me put to you the words of President Ghani himself, interviewed by CBS, the US television network, last year. We will not be able to support our army for 6 months without US support. The reporter: did you just say that without the US support your army couldn't last 6 months? President Ghani: yes, because we don't have the money.
Well, we have not necessarily defended all along our country with money and with donated metal. I mean, there are other values, and there are other, solid values in this country which we can mobilize to defend our country. Probably President Ghani then meant that if we are to conventionally defend the country, we need the assistance of the West. I do not disagree with him that we badly need assistance of the West, because we are in the frontline, global frontline, fighting terrorism, fighting radical, fanatic extremists. That's true. But to say without the West we will not be able to put up a fight for our dignity is wrong.
Even with the West, you're struggling, aren't you? All the statistics suggest that after 17 years of this particular war, and goodness knows Afghanistan has had to endure war pretty much on and off for the last 40 years, nearly half of the country is not in the control of the government?
Well, I completely refute that BBC statistics, half of the country.
It's not. No,
I don't know
me, it's
where
not
you
BBC
got that
statistics. I can tell you exactly where I got that from. This is from the report of the Special Inspector General, who is appointed, as you know, by the US government to assess the reconstruction. And the figures they gave, and these are dated January the 31st, 2018, were that a total of 56.3% of the Afghan districts were under Afghan government control. That leaves best part of 50% not, doesn't it?
Well, that's a joke. I think you mean Cigar. They are sitting behind desks in Kabul, and they don't have people in the field, and they are not traveling around. I disagree with that. But let me tell you how I measure control of the government. First of all, if you look at delivery of services, we provide in one way or another services to over 85% of our population. They obtain passports, they come to medical facilities run by the government.
Yes, they have to come to places.
For other
they're not
legal
able to provide
interaction with the service. Well, right. I mean, and then if you mean physical control under the government, I was Minister of Interior until a week ago. Of 400 plus districts we have in the country, 107 are disputed. They are contested areas. Doesn't mean they are under the Taliban control. And the Taliban have no major town in their control.
Doesn't mean they're under your control either.
Well, I mean, you said 50% of the country is in their control. That is totally wrong.
Let's move on to this question of the capacity of Afghanistan to stand alone. In 5 years, what do you think has been achieved by President Ghani?
In the last 5 years, President Ghani has had a number of achievements. First of all, he managed that psychological shock that the country was undergoing, that post-2014 there will be a meltdown, and he managed it well. He created a national unity government, and he calmed down the people. There was no political meltdown. That's one of his achievements. Plus, he led the troops well as a commander-in-chief to make sure that there is no major breakthrough in favor of the Taliban. Three, he decreased our dependence on one of our neighbors, which was using that dependence as a leverage to manipulate our economy. He made Afghanistan a land-linked country, and we now have functioning transit access to various countries in the region. And he also managed to maintain best of relationship with our allies, both in the West and in the region. And lastly, he maintained the progress and the pace of the progress of the past, and he added more things to that. So I believe under enormous stress, under enormous pressure that he was and still is, he did well, and he is doing well.
You can look at some statistics which underline perhaps the difficulties he still faces, and perhaps to measure against your list of achievements. According to the Afghan Central Statistics Organization, the poverty rate has gone up from 38% 7 years ago to 55% in 2016-2017. So more than half of the population, according to those figures, living in poverty. A UN survey at the end of last year suggested that opium cultivation was the second highest measure since the UN began monitoring it back in 1994. And as we've already said, 45,000 service deaths in the time he's been president. I mean, it's to say the least a very mixed bag, isn't it?
Well, that's our collective shame. It's not an exclusive Afghan shame that the poverty has increased, that the casualties have increased, that the poppy has increased. Remember, Afghanistan is a unique case of international intervention. If Afghanistan is still struggling with poverty and it has not been able to eradicate poverty the level we have all wished, we should not be blamed for it only. We have not managed to defeat terrorism collectively. And we have to go back to the initial slogan of the West, to the initial promise of the West that we will fight this war to the end, we will help Afghanistan have a viable state, and we will help you have a viable economy. And the West is very well aware that some of our challenges that we have today, it's not necessarily because of terrorists themselves, but because of the state neighboring us is supporting that terrorism.
So earlier in the
if we have failed to, let me finish. If we have failed to eradicate, opium completely, it's because we have collectively failed to provide alternative livelihood. And if we have failed to eradicate poverty, it is because a lot of the assistance that comes to Afghanistan is called off-budget. And off-budget means of each $1 we get less than a cent, and the remaining goes to the contractors back to the Western capitals. So therefore, yes, I agree with these statistics. It's not that we have not created bang for the buck, but it is because the aid has been misflowed and mismanaged, not by us, but a lot of cases by our donors.
So what you seem to be saying earlier in the interview was, thank you very much, we can do without the Western troops, we could fight this war without them. In other words, we don't need to make peace on the Taliban's terms. Now you're saying, actually, we do need all of this international help, and in some ways the way it's been conducted is part of the problem. Do you need the West or don't you need the West?
Well, the history has, it's an interconnected world. It's one way to say we can't do without the West, but let's be also very honest. Has the West been able to make it without us? Why should Afghans be under this enormous psychological pressure that you are a dependent nation? Of course, economically we are dependent, but security-wise also remember, West is also dependent on us. We are giving the ultimate sacrifice for global security. It has been our blood and our bones in defense of this cause. From the West, recently it has only been money and metal, money and weapons. We are giving the sacrifice. So please make sure this is not considered a charity case. We are a partner, we are paying with our blood, and we are paying with our lives. So we don't consider it a charity from the West. We are partnering with the West. They are taking some responsibility, and we are taking some responsibility. I think it will be unfair to look at Afghanistan as a case of charity and to look at the West only giving charity. No, they are not giving us charity. We are partnering with them for a very noble common cause, which is global security.
Nobody could accuse you of not getting involved. You've been, notwithstanding in the past, a critic of President Ashraf Ghani. You've nonetheless decided to join his presidential ticket for the elections in the summer to become a part of what he calls his team of state builders. Why?
Well, it's gracious and kind of him to bring his critics close to him, to trust them. In a country like Afghanistan, which is a very diverse society, a society affected badly by rumors, by conspiracy theories, and it's a country where there is mental fragmentation about a lot of things. When a president feels so confident and secure to bring his critic and his team, that shows his passion for the country and his patriotism, and also in his belief for diversity. So I appreciate it. I have come to join him with my identity. I have not deleted my history. I have not regretted my critique of him, but I am very grateful and thankful of him for opening up the palace and his team and bringing people who have been criticizing him. So because he believes we are Afghans regardless of where we are, and the Afghan unity is paramount for creating a strong state. And I believe he is a state builder, and I am very honored to join him build a stronger state.
Last April, after an attack in Kabul which killed 25 people, you put out a tweet which said, Islamic State, or Daesh as it's often known, in Afghanistan is fake. Why do you believe that?
Well, because I am an Afghan and I have been intelligence chief, I have been Minister of Interior, I have done a lot of research. The ISIS Khorasan is very largely fake. It's not migrants of the mainstream ISIS from Middle East who have come to Afghanistan. For the Pakistanis to present the Taliban as good boys, they have created another terrorist group called it ISIS-K in order to show that the Taliban can be good terrorists. In fact, the Taliban are like the Microsoft of the so-called ISIS-K, Islamic State Khorasan. They are fake. Defeat the Taliban, there will be no Daesh. Defeat the Taliban, there will be no Al-Qaeda. Defeat the Taliban, there will be no infrastructure left for manifestation of terror in any form in the future.
Let me put you what Fawad Chowdhury, Pakistan's information minister, tweeted last month in response to your comments, some of your comments criticising Pakistan and also suggesting that Pakistan was talking up the IS threat in its own interest. You said, he said, trivialising the threat of IS is to live in cuckoo land. The new Afghan interior minister, which was then you, although you only were in the job for 17 days because you resigned to fight this vice presidential job, he needs a reality check. Decide if you want Pakistan as a partner or as a scapegoat for your own government's failures, Mr. Minister. Time to get real and give up phantom thoughts from a paranoid mind. Are you being paranoid?
Well, not necessarily. Even if I am paranoid, perhaps as an individual, but they are paranoid as a state. And his tweet is very indicative of the paranoia within the state system. When an Afghan speaks the truth, they find no other solid fact except to attack that individual personally, which shows how vulnerable and how insecure they are. I have said this, and I want to say again, when I see Pakistanis, especially the official ones, I put the facts on the table. They are unable to look at my eyes and say this is refutable.
Zalmay Khalilzad, the UN envoy. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to pick up on the point you're making. Zalmay Khalilzad, the US envoy, clearly appreciates what he sees as a constructive role by the Pakistanis. He was quoted in the New York Times just a couple of days ago. I appreciate their hospitality and resolve to push for Afghan peace. We're heading in the right direction with more steps by Pakistan coming that will lead to concrete results.
Well, let me also quote Khalilzad's boss, President Trump, who said, Pakistan, you cannot fool me. We have given you $30 billion and you have supported terrorism. This is time you come to senses and deliver. That is also from Khalilzad's boss, President Trump. So we should give weight and we should give importance to the first man in America, to the White House statement. That's coming directly from the mouth of President Trump. So I echo what President Trump has said, and his South Asia strategy is a very sound strategy, and I hope all efforts of Mr. Khalilzad is in the context of South Asia strategy. I think President Trump understands that Pakistan is a deceptive system, it's a deceptive state, and he has been very true. You know, I like that tweet of him. I think it was so fantastic. He said, we have been fooled, and I hope the Americans are no longer fooled by the deceptive Pakistani system. And I hope Mr. Khalilzad, as I said, play a role in the context of the South Asia strategy of White House, which says Pakistan is supporting terror infrastructure, terror groups, and we have to end it.
If that, though, means talking peace, coming to a deal with the Taliban, which would thereby remove Pakistan's influence, if you're correct, in Afghani daily life, isn't that a price worth paying?
Well, we are not saying we should remove Pakistan's influence on Afghanistan. We say we must legitimize Pakistan's influence in Afghanistan. If they respect us, if they see us as a state, if they see us as a nation, if they see us as an equal neighbor and partner, they can have massive legitimate interest and influence in Afghanistan, and no Afghan will oppose that. But if they want to put a gun on our head and then they say and ask us to accept their dictate, that will never happen. Afghans are ready to pay even a higher price and not be dictated. You know, the dichotomy about Afghanistan is we are very poor, but in the meantime very proud. A lot of people think to come here and exploit our poverty and push us into becoming docile or accept domination. We have resisted and we will resist. Poverty has never been an excuse for Afghans to look down and bow down. We have always stood tall and proud. We will continue to do that. So my message for the Pakistanis is, you can have in us a very proud partner inviting you to partner with us in economy, to partner with us in development, to partner with us in economic development and regional integration. But if you want to play 19th century game to subdue us, you are mistaken, you are wrong. We are too heavy for you to punch.
I'm sure the British, if they know their own history, would acknowledge that and acknowledge what a proud nation Afghanistan has been for many, many centuries. But there does seem to be a momentum for something to change, doesn't there? Let me quote you, Roland Kobia, the Special Envoy from the European Union, who said, "We need to be ready. The diplomatic and political activity has created totally new dimensions." Would you accept that there is now a sense that something is changing, that finally peace could be in Afghanistan's grasp?
I would rather change that phrasing of could be. I say it must be. The very moment we are not subjected and condemned to humiliation, the very moment we are treated as a state representing Afghanistan, we are ready to ink an agreement to safeguard the dignity, honor, and national interest of Afghanistan.
But not
an unequal agreement is
not an agreement which has been dealt with behind closed doors by a US envoy and representatives of the Taliban in Qatar, where Afghans have not been present. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that's a big mistake. United States is stepping over its principle of not negotiating with non-state actors. I still believe that's a wrong thing to do, to elevate a non-state actor and to sit with them across the table, and while knowing that they are responsible for deaths of thousands of Americans and tens of thousands of Afghans. But United States is a superpower, and there's not much we can do to influence them. What we can influence is our own behavior, the Afghan behavior. And the Afghan behavior and the Afghan character and psyche is very clear. We will not agree to sign an unequal agreement which will undermine the sovereignty of Afghan state over the entire territory of Afghan land.
Amrullah Saleh, former Interior Minister, former Director General of National Security, now Vice Presidential candidate for this year's presidential elections in Afghanistan. Thank you for joining us for Hard Talk.
You are welcome. Thank you.